Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. I'm Tim O'Malley, joined today by Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated and John Bryce of Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated. Not a lot of football news over the weekend, guys, but there was a bit of a sad ending to Notre Dame's newest sports dynasty. Penn State defeats Notre Dame in the men's lacrosse quarterfinals, 14-12, and it was a bit of an ignominious end for the Irish. But Priester, I want to go to you because you had a point. There were two teams on that field yesterday.
Well, there were, and in the first half, Notre Dame was brilliant. I saw somebody say Notre Dame's putting on a clinic, and they were. And then I thought Penn State put on the clinic in the second half. And I guess I made the mistake of saying that Penn State played brilliantly down the stretch. They did. I know that for a fact. They were the second team on the field. But from a Notre Dame, from a
It'd be
Notre Dame
awkward if there was
pers
a third too. So that
yeah,
would
no,
be
I mean, from a Notre Dame perspective, I understand Notre Dame did not play well, and to some degree, they gifted that game to them. They were up 12-6, and then just and then whether you say they shut it down and played poorly or coached poorly or whatever, I thought Penn State. I mean, Penn State was so motivated. When you're trying to defend yourself as a two-time national champ, and the other side is, I mean, this is the moment they've been waiting for, an opportunity to beat Notre Dame. I thought Penn State played great. I get it that people think that Notre Dame choked. I would hesitate to use the word choke because if they had lost last year or the year before, that would have been a choke. This was not a national championship team, and so the team that was more motivated and really looked like had better legs at the end. The last 25 minutes of the game, it was Penn State. So I didn't think Notre Dame was going to advance much further. But when you're up 12-6, I guess you should be able to put the game away.
Yeah, the season as a whole, I think, proved that Penn State was the better of those two teams. I thought much of the day yesterday, Notre Dame looked like the better team and had ample opportunity to be in a position where it didn't see its season end. It would have been an upset, so I don't think you can call it just squandering the game or anything like that, but they certainly squandered a golden opportunity to sustain their season and try to extend their dynastic run. But still, like Notre Dame men's lacrosse has become the gold standard in college athletics.
The announcers pointed out several times that Notre Dame has struggled through the season at times to score goals, and we saw that happen yesterday. And that's why I say they weren't a national championship caliber team. And I thought the announcers did a really good job of explaining how they're not at. Well, first of all, Penn State,
or not the
their
same. Yeah.
their zone defense was tremendous. Notre Dame did not have answers for that. Look, the better team won. Should Notre Dame have played better than they did after leading 12-6? Certainly.
You know, we used the word squandered and not choked, but I found out I was putting this in Monday Musings. I was able to avoid hearing a score update because I wanted to watch it live to me after volleyball and flag football. You can avoid that at volleyball, by the way, a score update. You know where you cannot avoid a Notre Dame score update when you're coaching flag football of all Notre Dame kids, because that was one sad group. And the word is sold, by the way. That's the new word for choked and squandered, by the way, if you're kids. I don't know if you've heard that or not. You sold that game. That's the new word. You guys
Oh,
need to.
I like that.
You like
I'm
sold?
absolutely stealing the heck out of that. That's beautiful. Props to the youth.
Yes. So there you have it. That's the official word. JB, we had several questions on summer camp on our board, so I answered some of the particulars about how players could be coached by strength and conditioning or monitored by strength and conditioning. But you did some digging to find out some official dates for Notre Dame's, not summer camps, I misspoke, but when Notre Dame players report summer school coming up, and of course strength and conditioning workouts during the summer.
Yeah, and all the dates tend to run together, but I guess we're sitting here at May 19th. So Notre Dame's football players are in the midst of approximately 15 days off, right at 2 weeks, maybe a day or two longer. I think they have to report by the 31st. Summer workouts, I'm told, begin June 1st. I forget which day of the week that is. Maybe might even be a Sunday.
I think that's a Sunday, actually.
It
Yeah.
is a Sunday. So maybe June 1st is the reporting day and they start on the 2nd. But June 1st is the key day when they officially reconvene as a whole football team for the summer. And quick note, I believe they're going to be responsible for reporting for preseason camp around July 25th. And then, of course, they'll get started with practice a day or two after that. I forget if you get 30 or 31 days from before your opening game to begin your slate of practices. And obviously, Notre Dame starts August 31st, and we'll sprinkle in some off days all over the course of August. But that's around the report date is July 25th. Summer report date June 1st. Of course, Notre Dame has numerous recruiting camps and some official visits during that time. You ask about what is and isn't allowable. Notre Dame does its football school or football university. That's a lot of classroom playbook stuff and teaching with the guys that is off the field. The NCAA has changed the rules in recent years to allow coaches to be a little bit more active, a little bit more involved for a certain number of hours per week. They've gone back and forth as to whether or not you can or cannot use a football. I need to double check maybe before Thursday's podcast. I think they have changed it to where you can use the football some with coaches present. For the longest time, teams
Right.
were literally taping together towels into the size of footballs, and that's what they were using for their summer walkthroughs that were supervised by the coaches. Or they were taping towels with tennis balls on the end of them. I'm not like, I've seen this happen. I've gotten to witness some of those workouts at different schools, so I know that's how it was going down. The players have unlimited, so this is a key time when leadership steps up, when you've got the guys that are kind of starting to form leadership identities within the team, and maybe they're organizing some stuff. CJ Carr went ahead and did some of this stuff a year ago, and it's my understanding that CJ Carr is already flashing some leadership skills since the conclusion of spring camp. And that's not to say that Kenny Minchie is. Kenny Minchie also, it was stressed to me, is a leader in his own way, but CJ Carr right now is a little bit more vocal, a little bit more of that visible leader and organizing some stuff. The coaches, again, have that certain number of hours they're allowed to work with the guys per week. They have the football school stuff, and then they also have the strength and conditioning and performance program with Lauren Lando.
Priester, back in my day, the towel wrapped tennis balls also had barbed wire around them, and they would light them on fire to make it harder for you to practice in the summer. That's when men were men, though, right? So it's a little bit
But
tougher.
there were a lot of drops in those days.
Exactly, yeah.
That's true. It just looked like practice last August, basically. But there
They
was
used to do 3-a-days back in the day.
that's
I
insane, by the
I
way.
I know Mishawaka Marion High School. Not that I was participating, but I know that they did 3-a-days
Yeah.
back in the day.
My first newspaper college football beat was Carson Newman College, a D2 power in East Tennessee, and they did 3-a-days, but they also opened their camp with 160 guys and did 3-a-days with the intention of whittling their roster down sooner rather than later. But
That's
they
a
would
good idea.
they would have a morning practice
Oh,
again right after lunch, and then they would go a third time in the evening after dinner.
What
So
nothing separates the men from the boys better than 3-a-days.
what when did they stop 2-a-days? Because BK had it a little
I don't
bit. Weiss
I
had
don't
it. I don't remember either. They didn't have them in 12 that I can remember in camp. I wonder when the last 2-a-days was. But at the end of Weiss, they still had it. Right? In the
I
beginning of
think so.
BK, I vaguely
Yeah.
remember there being some. It had to be around the 11, 12 range. That was it seems so crazy now when you think about how they I mean now you get a fruit break, period number four. It looks refreshing to be out there sometimes. Um, ESPN, we don't always talk about other sites' articles, but they did rank Marcus Freeman number 4 on a list of 10 coaches. I just want to get your guys' thoughts because we probably had 6 questions on this one. So let's put it here in segment 1. The list is Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, Dabo Sweeney, Marcus Freeman, Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer, James Franklin, Kyle Whittingham, and the ubiquitous on lists preseason, Dan Campbell. Still going.
go ahead,
Um,
TC.
Smart Day and Sweeney have won national titles.
Right. Well, yeah,
Some of,
that's, I think, a good way
some
to
are
default
more
right there.
than some are more than one. Two of the three more than one. Um, I mean, are we?
Whether you agree with the list or not, they did a good job of explaining it, like the voting system and like, hey, this guy's a national title. So the questions we had on our board were normally, does Marcus need one more run, not a national title, one more run to think that he would rank firmly number 4? Because you can't pass over guys that have national titles right in front of you in that
No, you
situation. So yeah,
can't. You can't. And Sarkisian's been in the Final Four twice.
a good way to look at this is where would DeBoer be if this was a year ago, like before he left for Alabama and he took
I know.
Washington to the final,
There's certainly a recency bias. I like have a hard time getting too excited about. I know one of the guys voted Marcus Freeman eighth. I mean, I guess I get the reaction of that.
So, but he below Franklin Whittingham or Campbell. That'd be weird to think. I said Dan Campbell, by the way, Matt Campbell. Dan Campbell would
Matt
be ahead of these
Campbell.
guys. Yes,
Yeah.
um, he's a heck of a coach. But I would have trouble. I would have trouble putting him lower than seven after if you're doing any
Oh,
recency. Yeah.
I agree. I mean,
I, I'm surprised North Carolina coach Jordan Hudson isn't on the list.
she'll have her opportunities this
Yeah.
fall, I'm sure. Like I don't get too worked up about these kind of things. Let's see if Marcus Freeman can get to the national championship game again, and then we have a little bit different conversation. Then there's no
Then
doubt.
we don't. No, then he
Right.
has to be four.
Right.
Right.
Then
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
then there's no doubt about it.
That's yeah. You give. I mean, sometimes you forget that there's multiple national championships in front of him. Not everybody getting one. But also, Ryan Day is 3-0 in the last 3 years against Notre Dame, so it's kind of hard to argue against that one.
Yeah, I'm like you, T.O. I bet DeBoer would have been fourth on that list a year ago before taking over at Bama.
And Marcus obviously wouldn't have been fourth place.
Right, right. And I think it's interesting that James Franklin only got 26 points on that ESPN scale and slotted in at number eight. I know that they've not done anything playoffs wise. They've won some Rose Bowls and some RIP Pac-12 titles. What Kyle Whittingham has done overall, I think, is
Yeah.
pretty phenomenal in this era of football because he's never had the talent base nor the resources that so many others have. Now, I've been at that program, I've visited with them, I've toured their facilities, and they are doing a lot more than a lot of people realize NIL wise. I think just about every one of their players gets a brand new Chevy truck from one of their boosters that's an NIL deal. I'm talking like a really nice full size Chevy truck. Their facilities are pretty top notch. And talent, if you study it, has gotten incredibly improved in the entire state of Utah as the population in that state has exploded. And they've beaten a lot of USC teams and some Oregon teams that absolutely had more talent than them. So I would personally have Whittingham up higher on that list just for his enduring success and how he's done it and the way that those teams played. And when you look, they've produced a lot of NFL dudes. But otherwise, and then I think personally that Matt Campbell is a bit overrated, and I like Matt Campbell a lot.
It's hard to put him at number 10 currently, isn't it?
But
I think it is.
if you dissect his schedule and look at the quality wins, like there have been some nice moments, but there's not been an abundance of those nice moments. And we know that the Notre Dame team that was just a very solid Notre Dame team absolutely woodshedded the Cyclones of Campbell just a few years ago in the Cheez-It Bowl or whatever that was.
Priester, you had a few questions on the board that went from when are they going to fire Coach Stifler to how far do you think they can go if they make a regional, which I thought was a pretty big swing. And I think that was on Twitter, and you wrote they're the 11th place team in the ACC was your response. However, the baseball team, and I made a joke at our outline here, not half bad anymore though. It was a
No,
very impressive rebound.
I mean, tons of respect for what Sean Stifler's done. He could have lost this team. They were 4-14 in the conference and ended up 14-16 in
Yeah.
the conference. Carson Tinney has got to be a candidate to win the MVP of the league. He finished with, I
You
actually,
couldn't have said that a month and a
oh
half
my
ago.
God, unbelievable. He finished with 17 home runs and just, he had that streak where he had 10 home runs in 12 games. But I should learn my lesson about commenting about Notre Dame's other sports because if I say anything bad about them, then I'm mistaken. It's like, well, haven't they done enough to make the tournament? They're in 11th place in the ACC. No, they've got to do some damage in the conference tournament. And the other stat was a 6-12 against the teams that the 10 teams that are ahead of them. They didn't play all 10 teams, but they're 6-12 against those that are higher seeds in the ACC tournament. So like I don't know. I haven't studied it enough to someone actually said that the Notre Dame's RPI is 40th, which is impressive. But the point was, have they done enough to make the NCAA tournament? My response was no. I think they have to do damage in the ACC tournament, which they can do because Jack Riddell and Rory Fox have pitched so extremely well in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I need to absolutely give them credit because I was very vocal about how terrible they were mid-season, and they were just it was very poor how they were performing. But their schedule was much more difficult on the front end. Once it lightened up, they played better baseball. They took care of the games that they should have taken care of, and then probably the best series win of the Stifler era, in my opinion, was this past weekend
Yeah,
over Miami.
yeah, Miami.
And
And right behind that is winning 2 out of 3 against Louisville.
yeah,
That
exactly.
I mean, they're a young team. Some of their better players are young hitters, and they weren't getting the frontline pitching that they're getting now. So, and then, you know, Estevan Moreno is a long ball threat and a good baseball player, but he's not a major college shortstop, and they really don't have one, and he's had to play it. I shouldn't say he's not one.
Right.
They've been so accustomed to the last 2 shortstops that they had were outstanding, and they just didn't get that kind of play in the infield. Their third baseman is playing for defensive purposes. He's hitting well under 200. So they have some shortcomings, but they're playing good baseball. And they play late Tuesday night against Boston College that they should absolutely beat with Jack Riddell on the mound.
Yeah, that's key for them. Again, I give Stifler a lot of credit because, as you alluded to, Tim, and you know it as a former coach, he very easily could have lost this team mid-season when they were, among the worst records in the ACC, and instead they closed the back half of the season as strong as any team in the ACC. Now the next step is not only, seeing if they can improve and have a shot at an at-large NCAA tournament bid. They've got to win a postseason game for the first time under Stifler. And the ACC will remind our listeners switched. They announced that, I guess, earlier this year that they would go to a new format where everybody makes the tournament and it's single elimination. And so,
I think that's a great with the NCAA tournament coming up. All you do,
Yeah.
especially teams that, they have to go to the wall to win their conference tournament. And then when you're done with that, then now you jump into what really matters is in the NCAA tournament. So I think that's a really good idea, and I think that's something. I don't know what the other conferences are doing, frankly, but I think that's something to consider.
yeah. So, TP, do you think if they win 2 games in the ACC tournament,
I,
and their RPI, I think, going into the weekend was around
yeah,
44. So it does make sense that it's right at 40ish after taking that series from Miami. I think they have to win. I'll say this: I think they have to win at least 2 games in
I
the
agree.
ACC tournament.
I agree. Again, not knowing exactly who they're competing against per se. Some people have looked at this more than I have. There's a lot on our plate here at Irish Illustrated, and I cover Notre Dame baseball, but I'm not on top of everything every day. But I would just off the cuff, I would say they probably have to win 2 games, and I think they can do that with Riddell and Fox.
There's one question I would have, and I don't know the answer to it. Yeah, I know this in basketball, in men's basketball. Jay Billis at least told me in confidence, and I think he said it. I mean, when I met him, not like he called me up. When I met him, that your performance in a conference tournament in men's basketball is far less important than the regular season as a whole. And people just think, oh, maybe if Notre Dame could win 2 games and they lose, remember they would lose the Big East semis to Connecticut. You'd be wondering if they're getting in. Well, look how they played Connecticut. They played well. I wonder if that's the case in baseball as well, because he just said it's just 2 games. There's no recency bias when you're doing it with the NCAA
Yeah,
selection
and
committee. No,
their third game would be against number 3 seed North Carolina, which would probably be a little bit problematic, although Jackson Denny's has been pitching really, really well, which I didn't expect because he's battled injuries each of the last 2 years. And so really their entire starting rotation for weekend series, 3-game series has been really good.
and finally, I believe Tim Priester unintentionally noted that Notre Dame fans only question him when he questions the other sports, not football. So congratulations, Tim. When you're covering football, they won't care about what you say.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe? Founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt, or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. We'll be back with segment 2, Burning Up the
Segment 2
Boards.
is up. We call it Burning Up the Boards. We start with a question from Donnelly 3434. How will the rotation At defensive end of Botello, Traore, Tuihalamaka, Thomas Young, and Burnham play out.
Liberally would be the usage I would go with among those six. Thomas is, I think, the guy you want to see take a couple steps forward because I mean, that's really a 4x2. That's four Vipers of the first six you read and two strong side guys. And we know Burnham can help at Viper, but he doesn't have to anymore. Um, I don't think we should bury Tui Halamaka because he put forth some really impressive snaps just because he doesn't have the pro potential of Traore or intriguing potential of Thomas. But Traore is the best, probably not at his best September or August 31st, though. Nor would Botello be.
I would say that I would call Young the best. I know that Traore has proved it a little bit more. I think the ceiling is greater for Young, and
I was just on the Vipers. Yeah, I think Young's the
oh
better
yeah,
one.
my
Yeah.
my my fault. I apologize for that. But I would say you're talking about like to me, I think that Botello, Traore, Young, and Burnham are the four that play the most snaps, but that Tui Halamaka and Thomas also play significant snaps over the balance of the season for Notre Dame. But I think Burnham will play a lot. I think he's obviously very experienced and came on strong last year. He's got some good physical strength to him. I think his understanding of the game is really good. Again, I think we saw them just a little bit. Maybe use him inside a couple of times in the spring, didn't we? I feel like we did. Maybe.
Sometimes I feel like it's because they need veterans to give you good reps
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah. I'm not
various
saying it
spots,
would
though.
be
Yeah.
a regular thing for him. I just think and we've discussed, we know that they can do that in certain instances with Bryce Young. So I think there's good positional versatility, but I think those four play the most snaps there, but that doesn't mean that Thomas and Tui Halamaka are not factors.
Yeah, I think the two that get the most snaps, or to put in with the way you said it, JB, you said Young was the best. I would say a healthy Traore and Young are the two best. And I mean, Tuihalamaka, I mean, he could play either side. I'm interested to see how they utilize Botello. I still think that Thomas is going to be the sixth guy in that rotation. Burnham gave you a whole bunch of good reps when you need them, but some when he was still really banged up, he was trying to fight through some of that stuff. But
Yeah.
can L. Washington balance the snaps as well as Max Bulla did at linebacker? Because we were talking about that the other day. He did such a really good job of doing that. But it's a good situation because you have six that you feel pretty good about at defensive end, and you have six that they feel pretty good about now at defensive tackle. This kind of talk never would have, the rotation of defensive linemen now has become so significant, and it wasn't that many years ago that teams wouldn't do that. Notre Dame wouldn't do that.
Well, and
Uh,
Notre Dame couldn't do
Couldn't.
that. Remember when people ask us questions about how or why this program is so differently,
yeah,
and again, I'll always defer to your all's depth of knowledge, but just since I've been around, the quality of depth
no
in
doubt.
positions like that are so much better. When we're sitting here talking about being able to go six quality ends deep, they can go what at 5, 6 really good linebackers deep. I mean, it's just so different than what we saw it just a few short years ago. I think that's significant. And the final thing I would add when we talk about edge rush is we did witness a lot of them using KVA in some off the edge situations. And as
Yeah,
I've
Heck yeah.
talked and as I've talked to people since the conclusion of camp, they love what he did in those situations. They love his bend. They love the way that he gets to the quarterback. And when I've talked to more people in the program over the last month and a half since camp ended, it's been like KVA is not going to leave the field on defense very
yeah.
often
Well, that's
whatsoever.
good. I mean, between him and Snead, those two guys are quality pass rushers. But I do think that of those six defensive ends that we're talking about, all things being equal, and I realize that he only got into his fifth game, but Traore is the best pure pass rusher of that group. And so I think they need, obviously they need him to be healthy and they need him to be on the field in pass rush situations.
Back to KVA real fast, not to belabor this question. Who was it that said last year he's the hardest guy to block? Was it a running back or was it a tackle? Was it Knapp?
Uh,
Someone last August
I
said he
don't,
is the
I man, I
hardest guy
don't.
to block, and we're like, whoa, when that on blitzes.
Yeah, I think it might have been a running back.
I
Was
think
it?
it might have been too, because it would have been a natural question for the running back
Yeah.
to who was hard to block. Oh, and no, and it was
Could
about, I
it,
think it was about linebackers though, because Kaiser was involved in that too. So I
could
think
it,
it was
it
like,
could
but
have
yeah,
been Jadarian
it
Price?
might have been,
It
yeah. But
might have been.
remember that's an 18-year-old not yet played KVA that was that tough to block. So
Yeah.
that bodes well.
Yeah.
These two questions are related. We're going to read them one at a time, though. JJ Post, between articles and podcasts, you guys have examined just about every plausible turn the 2025 season could take. What is a realistic sentence, positive or negative, from next January that could tell you about the season that would thoroughly surprise you?
For me, I would say um, Jaden Greathouse has such a breakout season at wide receiver that he has more receiving yards than Jeremiah Love has rushing yards.
That would be,
Ooh, that would
yeah,
surprise me. That would
yeah. Well,
surprise.
no, it's humanly possible too. If you had
Yeah.
1,100,
Well,
1,200,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, here's a negative that would surprise me. Damn, Notre Dame just can't run the football this year. I
Yeah.
mean, that offensive line, there should not be any
Yeah,
point where
that's
we're
true.
saying
I forgot about that. Yeah,
this
that's
team cannot run the football well. I mean, the offensive line, the quality of the starters, the depth, the running backs. I guess maybe the one thing that's missing is that you know two pure run blocking tight ends, especially if you don't have Cooper Flanagan at whenever. That would shock me that somebody, man, offensive line, I mean, even when they're good, there seem to be times along the way, a game or two, where you just don't run the football well. I think it'd be really disappointing if we say that at
Mhm.
any point this fall.
I would say a humanly possible one that would surprise me would be Eli Raridan breaks Michael Mayer's single season records. I mean, he is the only tight end that
Yeah,
is going to play a lot that they will target a lot in the passing game. He's the only tight end. They don't have a great receiving core. They have a good receiving core. It is humanly possible, but that would surprise me if all of a sudden, and I'm saying just like Eli Raridan scored his eighth touchdown yesterday, tying Michael. Like you'd just be like, wow, that's a heck of a year because it just doesn't
yeah.
happen.
Well, I don't think he gets open the way Mayer did. He doesn't.
Or
He
no,
does.
they don't force it to him either
Now
the way they used to.
no, they don't. The catch radius is
Yeah.
should be really,
Yeah.
really good.
Related question from ND fan in an unholy land, and I need to know where he lives because this is a great name. It's a great name. We are having a beverage after Notre Dame goes 2-0 after beating NM. I did not know about that, but maybe he's talking to one of you guys. What are your reasonable top storylines for the year leading into these two wins?
Good, John.
Well, I mean, I sort of tied my
Yeah.
Jaden Greathouse answer into this question as well.
Greathouse
Reasonable.
says continues the breakout games for 2-0 start, you're saying? That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's like reasonable top two storylines would be that their defensive line is as stout as we think it could be, and then the other one would be that CJ Carr wins the starting job and makes Notre Dame a much more balanced offense with great downfield passing um, passing threat potential. Those would be it for me. Like I think both of those things are completely possible. I know that we still have to see Jason Onye do it against quality competition, and he'll get that chance immediately in those first two games against Miami and Texas A&M. But yeah, those would be it for me. Those like if we're sitting there and Notre Dame's 2-0 and we're talking about a couple of the biggest storylines or things like we expect Notre Dame to be able to be a run first team that can lean on its run, but that means football coaches that know the game a lot better than any of us also are going to try and scheme to take that away from Notre Dame. So to me, the key would be then all of a sudden CJ Carr is the downfield passing threat at quarterback that we saw him prove to be at times this spring.
I think he will be. I mean, I agree with that, John. I think he, in short order, will be a guy that you can say, okay, go. We can open up the offense with him and let him throw it a little bit. I'm looking at on the other side of the coin at the opponents, and I really, we everybody loves Notre Dame's corners, and I think everybody loves Don Schuler at safety. I think they have an outstanding secondary, but something in the back of my mind, they dodged Carson Beck in the playoffs, and now you're going to have to face him. and I think he's going to be completely healthy when they play him. And I'm just concerned about Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck is better than many people think that he is. I realize he threw a bunch of interceptions last year. He was forcing the football to a lesser Georgia wideout core than I think we're accustomed to seeing. Just something in the back of my mind concerns me about Carson Beck. So I want to come out of that game saying, "Wow, they did a really good job against Beck in the Miami wideouts."
Yeah, I think I'm along the lines with Carr. I think if you're looking like at a headline or lead sentence, CJ Carr, Irish improved to 2-0. Carr now 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the season. Because if CJ Carr comes out of Miami and A&M without turning the ball over, I think Notre Dame is going to handle those two teams. They're the better team, but they don't have the better situation that we know for sure under center. Certainly not the more prepared one for game
Yeah,
number one and game number two.
Miami lost. How many guys did they have at the combine? And they had like eight,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
a
They have
bunch of
plenty.
them, a bunch of them got drafted. There's a transition there, and as we sit here now, I'll probably feel differently about when I'm sitting there that night. But um, as I sit here right now, I like Notre Dame's chances against Miami if Carson Beck doesn't have a huge passing game.
I'll say this real quickly. As you guys know, and I've talked about it some here, I was at the National Director of Football Ops conference a couple of weeks ago at Dallas Cowboys headquarters, and there were some. I spent some time with some Miami staffers who were there, and to say that game is circled on their calendar would be a gross understatement on my part. So there will be that'll be the most hostile environment that Notre Dame has seen in quite some time, certainly since opening at Texas A&M in 24, and I would contend up along the lines of 2022 at Ohio State. That's the type of atmosphere I think that's going to be, especially after visiting with those folks. Also, in addition to Carson Beck, you've got Francis Mananoa, the ridiculously talented tackle for Miami that may well be the first offensive tackle taken in the 2026 draft. So we'll learn a lot. And they had some portal additions to their offensive line. So it'll be a great test for Notre Dame right off the bat. I think that, to your point, TP, Beck will come out with looking to prove that he's better than the guy that my understanding is Georgia coaches didn't try to keep him, didn't ask him to return. He decided he was not going to go into the NFL draft, and they said, "Good luck to you. We appreciate everything you've done." So I think that's interesting. But yeah, that's going to be an immense test. And yeah, you're right. If CJ Carr has 4 or 5 touchdowns and 1 pick and 580 yards passing through 2 games, I think that's pretty stout.
From beer and ping pong, we have great names on today's podcast, by the way, after ND Fan and Unholy Land and beer and ping pong. What is the latest with Cam Williams, and what are fair expectations for him this season? We get asked about Cam a lot. We got to get a question in.
I,
He was
I,
highly ranked. If he's highly ranked, he gets asked about
I,
after.
I get it. And I still think that he's a project. I don't think that he's going to be ready to make a significant impact this fall. I don't, that, that, look, there have been some highly rated receivers that have come through here that didn't make an instant impact. And I thought they're never going to. I'm not saying that about Cam Williams.
Right, right.
I just don't think that as a redshirt freshman, he's going to be ready to crack the rotation. So keep your head down, keep working, keep getting better. And I think there's a chance on the back end of this at 2026, he'll be ready to play, or he could be ready to make a significant contribution then.
To me, it's do we hear positive buzz about him this summer? Is he putting in the extra work? Is he getting extra time running routes with CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie? Is he working on the Monarch machine? Is he doing the stuff that even positions him to compete to be a rotational factor for the Irish in 25? I think this is a critical summer for him to showcase his dedication and determination to be a factor for Notre Dame and to try and force the coaches to have to make a tough decision about his ability to be a factor sooner rather than later.
From Coach Aguilar, if NBC did a docuseries similar to a 30 for 30, what seasons or situations would you choose? And I assume he means Notre Dame football only.
Yeah, I would the 2020 season, because what
Oh,
Notre
great
Dame
one.
did,
Yeah.
that would be my top choice
How did I not write that
because of
down?
the
Great
yeah
call.
I mean the preparation. I thought Jack Swarbrick was this will bother a lot of people. I thought he handled the situation brilliantly. He was a huge influence on the ACC delaying a decision to cancel the season or delay or whatever. Um, and then I thought Brian Kelly had his team absolutely totally prepared for that season. To me, well, you throw in the you throw in all the details of the pandemic and what they had to go through and dressing in different locker rooms and we forget about that stuff. I
Well,
mean,
they just
that's
handled it
eight.
better than everybody. They just handled it better
They
than everybody
did.
else. Yeah.
They did. They were what the regular season was 10 games. Is that what it
Yeah.
was?
Yeah.
They were 10-0, and that didn't surprise me in the least.
No, we picked 10 and 0. I picked 10 and
Yeah, we did.
0.
We did. We did.
Yeah,
Both we
yeah, we
both
did.
picked
Yeah,
10
both
and
of
0.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I would say 2012, because that was,
Weird that they did it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you guys again know that season so much more intricately than I do, but as an outsider looking in, that was a huge watershed moment in Brian Kelly's career and a resurgent moment for Notre Dame football. So I would pick 2012 and 2024. I mean, when Brian Kelly did that in 2012, he'd been a head coach for quite a long time. What Marcus Freeman did last year in year three as a head coach, um, and then after the way the season started 1-1 and the chance to just completely unravel after the Northern Illinois loss, to me, that's why I would pick 12 and 24.
Yeah.
The,
Tim, let me just
yeah, no,
for
go ahead.
me 2024 goes without saying. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of why I didn't say that.
For me, the 2012 is a great point. I feel like the Teo Netflix thing cleared up a lot of what I would need to see from 2012. If you were going to include the offseason of 2013, it might be the craziest docuseries you could ever get, Priester, with everything that happened in that situation. I mean,
No.
like Golson being suspended is like 10th on the list. You're starting quarterback of what happened there. I would go back to the 89 range, Priester, because that great team is defending champs. I'd like to see how everything is handled, and I want to and the captains and all that handled that kind of humiliating ending loss to Miami because I remember reading you and Lou and Blue and Gold and the captains that you interviewed talked about how they had no chance of winning because they were told not to fight back and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that play out. You need a little controversy when you're having these docuseries, right? You can't have everybody smiling happy the entire time.
Well, and that's why I was going to say which one of the Charlie Weiss years would be best. Would it be the unraveling? And then also I would love to see one on 96 since it was Holtz's last season.
Yeah.
Just a lot of fascinating
A
components
lot
that
of
year.
them.
They won
Yeah.
8 games, but declined a bowl bid.
Yeah.
Is the way I remember that as a fairly young pup. So
Lot of emotions, man. After that Rutgers game, to see Holtz coming to the interview tent, I believe it was at that point, and just in full-fledged tears, and I mean the emotions. Yeah, that was, and that I mean there was no love lost between the head coach and the athletic director, um, which, I mean,
A little different now.
it, yeah, I mean, yeah, well, yeah, it was, I mean, it was
Well,
kind of
I mean
like,
Marcus and
the
Pete,
clash
not
of,
not Colts.
no, I understand
Yeah.
the clash of egos, because
Yeah.
the clash of egos with Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick, especially early on, was really significant. And, these are two powerful men, leaders in their own respect in a different part of the equation. Yeah, there's 88, of course, the
Yeah, it'd be
quarterback,
fun.
the
That's all
well,
fun
the
though.
93, the quarterback situation, the devastation of the Boston College loss. I mean, absolute devastation. That's how just about everybody felt.
I would say we canceled our party at Lafayette Square that night, but we didn't need to cancel it because nobody was going to come anyway. So there was no
Yeah.
reason to tell anybody you weren't having a party. It was that bad. I am going to skip over this question because I think we've touched on it a little bit with Tyler Buckner being the most experienced quarterback on the team.
Okay.
But and go to Jay New. I've seen a few draft people gush over the fact that Jeremiah Love was the starting gunner on punts, and it got me thinking about the Irish special teams. With Coach Biaggi and the great depth of the team, will the special teams battle for best unit on this team? I'm sure I'm being a homer, but I see even more block kicks, unbelievable fakes, game-altering hits this season, a la Urban Meyer at Florida and peak Bama. And I will throw in Urban Meyer at Ohio State, Tim Priester, because we watched his
Oh,
team cover kicks once and we wanted to
yeah.
leave the stadium.
Notre Dame special teams against Urban Meyer coached
They
Ohio
couldn't get to the
State
nine on a
specials. They
kick
couldn't
return.
return. They couldn't return a kickoff.
Go ahead.
Well, this is, I mean, with this question wouldn't have been asked a year ago because, and it probably wouldn't have been asked
Or two
yeah, it
years.
wouldn't have been asked in the first month of last year because things weren't going very well. But Marty Biaggi's creativity, the block kicks, the
Creativity.
fakes. I mean, it's a legitimate question because when the season ended, I mean, think about the impact that Biaggi's units had in the Georgia
Oh
game
my God. The Georgia game, just insane.
where they're declining, they're accepting offsides on punts because they're concerned about having a punt blocked. Legitimate question because Biaggi came out of that 2024 season ranked among the best in the country as special teams coach.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he won the Football Scoop Special
He
Teams
did.
Coach of the Year
Yep.
award. He and Jesse Schmidt, as senior analysts, were both praised by those who voted for them. And again, I like to point out because I don't want anybody thinking there's a bias there by me bringing them up because of the Football Scoop Awards. What I like to note is that it's not by idiot media people like me; it's by their peers. And so Marty Biaggi won that award because his peers, fellow special teams coordinators and award-winning special teams coordinators, voted him, and my boss handles all tabulating all the votes, and he said it was an absolute landslide that Marty Biaggi very surprisingly won it going away, not like a couple of years before that when Brian Mason won it for Notre Dame, and it was an incredibly close vote between Brian Mason and Pete Limbo. So
South
we could
Carolina.
say
Yeah.
that
Pete Limbo. Yeah.
we could say that for sure about this group. Some of that's just quite frankly going to depend on if Noah Burnett retains his all ACC form or if we see the consistency struggles.
And I think Marcus Freeman, well, I know he empowers
Yes.
his coaches. He empowered Marty Biaggi to be creative and come up with something. And Biaggi, who's had a bag of tricks for a long time, uh, answered that call. So yeah, legitimate
Tim,
question
And
now.
Marcus Freeman, yeah, Marcus Freeman himself coached punt coverage last year. I mean, he wanted to coach that phase of the game, and he was the punt coverage coach last year.
and Tim, before you take this next one, let's not forget Jordan Faison is a special teams weapon in coverage and in fakes and doing things like that. I don't mean as a punt returner necessarily. I mean everything else he does. Louisville impacting the punt. Obviously, the fakes can go to Faison. He helps a lot. So it's not just Jeremiah Love. There's two dudes you can have out there that can do a lot to you at any time.
We have a question from Irish Gambler. There was talk about two spotting on defense during camp last year. I'm curious to know why two spotting would or would not work for this camp. One of the keys you discussed was graduate level experience, and lots of those guys are now in NFL camps. Could the Irish have two spotted if Chris Ash was the DC last year? Or is this better designed for fine tuning instead of maxing out rep distribution? I guess I'd like to know what conditions allow for it and what conditions are not ripe for two spotting. Tim, I think it's important that you give a little context to what two spotting means because I'm not sure everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, last August, Notre Dame was able to two spotting would be spotting the ball on one field and the other field, practice field, and get reps from ones and twos versus other ones and twos. So there wasn't as much stand around watching in August. This is a yeah, and then twos and threes and twos and threes. It's not just ones and twos, but you get more reps going simultaneously, two spots of the football. Um, I don't I think it's a great question because I had not considered they were able to do this so much more easily because of so many leaders from within and Al Golden being in his third year. But now that they've done it, they sure have a heck of a lot of people coming back that were able to pull it off last year. And I think if Marcus Freeman wants it, and I'm sure Chris Ash has done this before in his life, he'd be able to pull it off as well.
Yeah, and we've heard Notre Dame coaches and players talk about the benefit last year of being able to two spot. So I don't see them trending away from that. They have the space to do it. We've already talked on this podcast about their improved quality depth in a great number of positions. And I think you have to do it as much as you can in this age of the transfer portal because it keeps guys more engaged if they're getting more reps all over the course of preseason camp. They don't go into the season already disaffected with how things are going. So I would look for Notre Dame to continue it. I think Chris Ash will be able to do it, as you said, T.O. We'll ask him in August if it's something he's done before.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it has. And again, I think with his NFL experience and his college head coaching and coordinating experience, he'll be able to do it as well, and it's something he's probably already done. So I
Very,
look for Notre Dame to continue it because it meant so much, or it seemed to mean so much to them last year.
very quickly, Tim, it just occurred to me if Ash did it, he probably would have had to have done it at Ohio State where you have the depth to do it because he couldn't have done it at
Yeah.
Rutgers really. Without me not making a joke, it would be really hard to do that
No,
at
true.
Rutgers. Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that depth is the key to it, but anything that eliminates the standing around and gets
Yeah.
more reps in.
It's
Like I mean, I realize, okay, maybe the depth is at a level that it hasn't been in a while, but I mean, I'm even surprised that it wasn't done in some capacity, with the threes and fours, and we're talking about walk-ons now. I don't know. I do know this. Anything that gets you more reps and less standing around is great. And these guys, there's so much talent and so much depth, they need those reps. So I think it's a great thing, and I'm sure they'll continue. It worked for them last year. I'm sure they'll continue to do it.
And like we've heard Marcus talk about, and other head coaches as well, talk about the need to keep guys engaged because of that transfer portal. We've seen it change the way that programs, specifically to include Notre Dame, people that I've talked to, the way they approach their freshmen. And you have some guys who will volunteer to redshirt, and some guys who will be happy to play their entire first year on special teams if that's what it takes. And you've got to be able to get those guys prepared in August, and a big part of that is maximizing rep opportunities.
From Troy Murphy Goat, I disagree, but I respect your opinion on that one. In doing your jobs, do you have to trust insider information a lot more now than maybe 10 years ago, as it seems your practice access has shrunk? How do you determine what information is legit and what is smoke? And I think this question is only asked in the spirit of football players on the team, not like behind the scenes information. It seems like it's practice related.
Well, I mean, you'd have to go back further than 10 years really to have I mean, when I was starting out, in the 80s, I mean I saw all the practices. Spring practice, fall practice. And so yeah, you had a much you could stand there and listen to position coaches coach. I learned a ton of football just listening to position coaches coach. You could bounce around from position to position. But I mean, you trust. There are some sources that are more reputable than others. You trust those guys.
To me, you better make sure you have some real authentic relationships, and um, hopefully that's one of the reasons I work for Football Scoop is that, especially in my time covering the University of Tennessee, I saw a hell of a lot of firings, and the place Rocky Top embodied its name for the longest time. And the pro of that, while it drove me nuts as a beat writer, the pro of that was I met a lot of coaches, and it was incredibly important for me to have authentic, real relationships with that. I don't ever want to be viewed as transactional. And so you better have authentic, real relationships. And then us, and Mintalk and the other people that we talk to, Pete, Matt Freeman, we all better have interpersonal, real, authentic relationships so that we trust if we're sharing information and discussing what we're hearing and what players are buzzing and who needs to step up, that we all know that we can trust one another. And unfortunately, I have to bounce because I'm due to host another podcast right now. I want to quickly preview the last question and say, without preventing you guys from asking it properly, I would just say my favorite playoff format would be 10 or 12 at-large bids if it's 14 or 16 teams, 4 auto bids for the power conference champs, but not auto seeds for the power conference champs. I appreciate you guys. I look forward to visiting again on Thursday.
All right, JB.
I was just going to ask JB on Thursday the question again, but we're going to take it
No,
anyway.
okay.
But TJP, my going back to this question with insider information, I do think like we have immeasurable more access to coaches, coordinators, and players in the spring and August than we used to have. We
True.
had one once, so you could now.
Yeah.
The question is, what do you trust with your eyes? We have way less practice access than Brian Kelly's last August was 5 open practices fully. Now, usually one of those would get capped somewhere and you go home for 20 minutes early or something along those lines. They did do the fake field goal when they ushered us out once, the Deshaun Kaiser fake field goal in the Virginia game, which proved to matter for a touchdown. But we had a lot more in the BK era too. I don't know what I prefer. I need one more full open practice, I think, in the spring because I don't think they
That
work on enough stuff in the spring that they can't let us see it.
yeah. No, I agree
I
with
get
that.
August camp. I mean, how much are you really going to give someone August camp when you're open with? First of all, he's open with Ohio State, A&M, and Miami, and we had more access when they opened with the Navy. I wonder why. It's not like he softened or
Yeah.
something. There
Yeah.
was that was part of it right there.
Now, the ability to observe is it's an immeasurable advantage. There's no doubt about it. Uh, the interviews, I mean, I would,
They help the
yeah,
site. They just that they're not going to tell you what's wrong very often.
no,
In the spring, they
no,
will, like Denbrock
no,
in
but
retrospect. But
when you have constant access to the assistant coaches, you
yeah,
can get a lot of questions in there, and sometimes they don't answer them, but sometimes they
oh, that's
do.
true. The Stuckey four receiver thing is
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
good.
I think that stuff's invaluable. One more full preseason practice,
Yes,
as early as they want to make it.
right.
One more full preseason
I was
practice.
just about to say, like the one they had at School Field in South Bend. But guess what? That was before the Navy game, not before
Yeah,
another hard
yeah.
game. So they play Miami and A&M to start this year. We may not be inside. I would like to point out 2020 when Tim Priester and I went undefeated on our picks. We hadn't seen a practice since March 5th. So you don't always have to be inside to see something like that. Just the weirdest thing ever. And I'm not sure we should share that so often with people that want to judge us. Final question. B. Cascorna. What is everyone's preferred playoff structure? Not for Notre Dame, but your personal preference as a college football fan. He gives a bunch of options 8, 12, 14, 16, auto bids, if any, auto buys, seedings, how many rounds on campus, if any.
Well, I personally, the four auto bids to a conference, I think is crazy. I mean,
Oh,
that's
God. The 16. Yeah. Let's say if he goes to 16, that's
yeah.
ridiculous.
If it goes to 16, hell, I mean, we've only had an expanded playoff once, and it
Oh,
was
I know.
12 teams. I thought it worked out pretty well. I enjoyed it. There was a lot made of the teams that got buys that lost, but I mean, you ask though you go into a situation again. You ask a team, do you want to play twice or you just want to play once?
Right. No, you're right. No
Every
one's saying it. No one's
right,
saying
no one is going to say. I realize that you've had longer off when you get a bye and you don't play till around New Year's, but no coach is going to choose playing two games over one. Look, I don't know. I don't know how the other ones function. We only had it once and it was 12 teams, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Maybe because we kept flying to a different
it. I was
location
going to
every
say, yeah, it
week.
was really fun for us.
That was wow, that's really great. This is good. I like 12.
I actually enjoyed the 12. The main change I would do would be I would drop conference championship games because now they're stupid. I would
I agree.
I
I
would
agree.
I would crown the conference champion and give them an auto bid. The
Okay.
conference
I know I
champion
don't have yeah,
can have
I
the auto
don't
bid.
necessarily have a problem with that. I
Yeah,
remember saying to Jack Swarbrick, well, it was just last year when I was talking to him about the success of the first 12 team playoff. And I said, well, they're never going to drop the conference championship games because of the money involved.
right, right.
And he said, I disagree.
I think the money
You've
will
got
still
you've got to
remain.
pay them. You've got to pay them
That's a good
for
point, Jack.
not playing the game essentially. But their money talks one way or another, whether you play the game or not. And so to get rid of that, part of the football playoff would have to build in the revenue for the conference championship game that's not played.
I think there's an auto bid for the conference champions of the four conferences. There's an auto bid for the group of five selection. For a group of five selection. It opens it up to more just the best teams. Like Ohio State's still getting in last year. Texas would have gotten in. Notre Dame would have gotten in. These teams are all most of these teams are still getting in. I just mainly I don't like conference championship games anymore because I think they're stupid at this point. Like it was super cool when the SEC had a conference championship game and It was just something to watch on Saturday. Then everybody started getting their conference championship games. The Big 12s was pretty good too. You just don't need them if you can properly schedule. I know there's a lot of teams, but like your conference championship games are rematches anyway. You're getting rematches in the conference championship game. So what's the point if you already defeated a team? I would just drop that. I don't know what 16 would look like. I feel like, I mean, I always thought 12 was too much and then I enjoyed it. So maybe I would enjoy 16 too. It just feels like, do you really need those other six? What if you expand four more teams last year? Ole Miss gets in two. Then you're getting all the SEC and Big Ten teams in the world in because they're just going to be ranked ahead of the next best group of five team or the next best
Yeah,
ACC Big 12 team.
I'm interested to see the first time that a double digit seed makes the championship game.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a long time before that happens.
Final question for you. Would you rather have 8 or 16? You only get to choose one of those two, 8 or 16. I take 8.
I don't know.
Yeah. You don't have to
I mean,
answer it. It's your prerogative.
no, I would take 8, but there would be an uproar because we've had 12, and so
Yeah.
they're never going to go back ever
But we don't like
again.
people, so that's okay.
It will,
Remember.
it will never be, it will never ever be less than the previous year.
True. That's true. Well, hopefully Notre Dame is one of the 12 because that was a fun journey last year, and then we'll figure out if I don't need 16 teams. Come on, we saw almost the perfect setup last year. It was great. Just drop those stupid money grabs. Although I do enjoy that day, that first December weekend, because we're off. You can watch some football and just, especially last year, just sit around and watch teams try to vie to play against Notre Dame. But that doesn't always work out that way. But this Thursday, we're 1 week, number 10 days removed, or 10 days away from talking to Marcus Freeman for the only time this summer. All the sites will have a chance to speak with Freeman in a couple of groups. That is next Thursday. I'm glad I spoke with Tim Priester prior to this podcast because I had written it down as this Thursday and I was preparing my questions for Coach Freeman already. I might have shown up on campus had you not said anything. But we will have a regular Irish Illustrated Insider podcast on Thursday, May 22nd. Until then, for John Bryce of Football Scoop and Tim Priester of Irish Illustrated, thanks for joining and listening.